What are you afraid of? Just think about it. Because I know when I was tiny, I was afraid of the dark and some other things that don't bother me as much now. And as we get older, we might have a larger fear of falling because of the damage that it can do to us and things like that. But just think where you are right now. Think what you're afraid of. Maybe ask yourself why. It's interesting, the why, because when I looked up fears in general, I was kind of curious what the top ones were and stuff like this. And what's funny is I remember hearing it when I was younger, that fear is a learned behavior, except for a couple of them that we're just kind of have by instinct, right? For some reason, we all instinctively have a fear of falling and really, really sudden and loud noises, like we just have reflexes to this. But about everything else that you can assess is a learned fear. You know, spiders and snakes and those kinds of things are learned. So maybe the better question is, what is it that you have learned to fear? A few of the common ones that people have is a fear of the unknown, right? There's anxiety of all sorts, fear of the unknown. Like right now, I'm in a great state of health. Everybody in my family is healthy. Our household is stable. But you know, just overnight, in a moment's notice, every single bit of that can change. It's happened in plenty of countries where they went to bed one night and everything was fine, and the next day they woke up and everything had fallen apart. So the fear of the unknown is real. Just a couple other ones that I kind of want to build this lesson on is, you know, there's a fear of failure. People are afraid of the shame or the rejection or something that might happen, the embarrassment or something like that. And so sometimes people don't try because they have this fear of failure. And I am not exempt to the fear of failure. But one that I experienced that I thought I was alone in until I looked it up for this lesson, and so I'm not alone, which is nice to know, is on the other side of that coin. There is a such thing as a fear of success. Now, I don't know if that sounds ridiculous to you or you can think about it and that makes sense to you. And the reason for that is because if you do something and you succeed, all of a sudden these doors open. And there's a whole lot on the other side of that, new responsibilities. There's a constant pressure, in a sense, to keep on holding together this success, okay? So it might seem weird, but it's a real thing, and it turns out that I'm not alone. And I want to look at a couple examples real quick about how this kind of comes across in real life, and we'll make a spiritual application out of it. For a biblical example, we have David, who in his youth had a ton of courage, and it led to a series of successes. And all the people, you know, Saul slew his thousands, but David slew his 10,000s. They're singing his praises, right? And this is the man that later becomes king. So what did success mean for him? Well, more pressure to keep killing the enemy, which he had all the courage in the world to do, because he says, what does he say? The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? He was not afraid of his enemies. He didn't want to touch Saul because Saul was the Lord's anointed. He had a problem disciplining his own children when they did pretty horrible things, and under the law they needed discipline. And so he went into hiding and he hid. But he asked that question, whom shall I fear? Because the Lord is my light and my salvation. Another one, just because maybe the time of year it is George Washington. This man, just like David, had a lot of youthful ambition for the military. His father died when he was 11. He was ready to go put on the red coat and fight with the British. That's what he wanted to do, and his mama kept keeping him home. No, I need you here. I need you here. You have duty to mom, you know. Take care of mom. And eventually he just couldn't take it anymore, and he went out there and he got on that horseback and he got shot through his clothes, he got shot through his hat, but he never got shot himself. And this like exhilarated him, and he became a sort of a legend, like you just could not shoot George Washington, okay? But here's the thing, years of war made him weary. And that ambition didn't exist anymore. And he gave that sword back to Congress, and he wanted to retire, and he went home to Mount Vernon. He just wanted his farm. And you know what they did? Because of his successes, Not because of his failures, because of his successes. They came in, they knocked on his door and said, Mr. Washington, the Articles of Confederation aren't working out. We need to do a constitutional convention, and we would really like you to preside at this meeting for this new constitution. And the basic answer, he gave a lot of different answers, but the way that people sum up his answers is, have I not yet done enough for my country, considering all that he did through the revolution, okay? But you know what? He went and he did that, and he chaired that, and we had the Constitution. You know what he wanted to do? Or just go back home and enjoy his farm and his retirement. Is that what happened? It is not what happened. He had 2 terms as president. So my point is that the success can be a weariness, and it can be a scary and intimidating thing because people see that, and then they want more, and then they want more, and then they want more, and it's better just to not try, or just to not stand out, or just to not stand up. So you can have just as much fear of success as you can failure. And listen, this is the thing that God expects when you look at that parable of the talents, and somebody had 5 that became 10, and 2 that became 4, and the one that hid his in the ground. But the success was the expectation of more, and the expectation of more. What did Jesus say in John 15? You know, I'm the vine and my Father's the husbandman, right? And every branch in me that bears fruit, he purges it, you know, that it may bring forth more fruit. And herein is my Father glorified, that you will bear much fruit. Like, God is wanting to squeeze more out of me. He doesn't want me to, hide in the cave or to not try. So what do we know biblically about fear? We know that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, and it's the beginning of wisdom. That's Proverbs 1 and Proverbs 9. So the fear of the Lord, then, is a good thing. That's where we get our knowledge, and that's where we get our wisdom. But that's the beginning, right? That's just the beginning. We're told, though, 2 Timothy chapter 1, Paul tells Timothy, you've got this gift of the Spirit within you, stir it up. He kind of want to suppress it, didn't want to stand out. And he's like, you can't suppress it. You've got to stir it up. You've got to let it out. It's in you for a reason. God didn't give us the spirit of fear. He was nervous. He was afraid because, there's a thing as persecution. Paul had been a persecutor. There were others. So he was afraid. But God did not give us a spirit of fear. So, therefore, right, we should not fear what men should do to us. That's Hebrews chapter 13. We shouldn't fear that. Right? What are we supposed to do, though? What does Jesus say? Matthew chapter 10, verse 28. Don't fear those that can destroy the body, but fear him that can destroy both body and soul in hell. Right? So in other words, we need some fear correctly placed so that we make the better and the right decisions and we don't fear the things we ought not to fear. And that's hard. That's hard. It's hard to, stand up and say, right, I've sinned, right? Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned, right? This is a hard thing to say. It's an admission, but it is true. So fear God and keep his commandments, right? The summation of the book of Ecclesiastes, right there at the end, the sum of the whole thing. Fear God, keep his commandments. So that's my question for you tonight. If your fear is aligned in the right place and you fear God, have you or are you keeping his commandments? From the beginning, from the obedience to the gospel, to the walking in the light, to not fearing what man should do to you, to not being afraid of the unknown and what's around the corner because God is already there, right? Whom shall I fear? Why? Because he's my light and my salvation. Is he your light and your salvation? Tonight as we sing.